Hello everybody, Tom Ellsworth here, and welcome back to Case Studies with the BizDoc. This week, it's the making of Travis Kalanick and Uber. We're going to find out what made Uber co-founder and CEO Travis Kalanick into the man he is today. More importantly, the highly successful leader and CEO. And along the way, we're going to look at the first 4 rounds of financing for Uber. In a later case study, we're going to dive into Uber a little deeper and take a look at what they did to overcome controversies when they reached opposition in the face of their success, and how a great company recovers and keeps growing at a record rate. But for today, let's dive into what made Uber and what things were in Travis's life that formed him into the CEO we know today. Today's core points are the following 3 items. Number 1, most great CEOs don't come out of nowhere. They had some sort of learnings or experience along the way. There are very few Bill Gates and Mark Zuckerbergs who dropped out of Harvard, joined a company, and then went forward. And in the case of Zuckerberg and Gates, they both had a lot of experience along the way. Other CEOs don't have it that way. They learn things along the way, and that's point 1. Most great CEOs don't come out of nowhere. Point 2, when you're building a company, assemble a great core team early. You can't do it yourself, but keep yourself in the vein of the Lean Startup, a great book that I recommend by Eric Ries. Keep it lean, but get a great team of core people that will be the brain trust and the genius that moves your company forward. And point number 3, the moment you know what you've got, go big and go fast. And if you have a great core team, that's your platform to go big and go fast, because you can't do it alone. So those are the core points, and now let's dive into the life of Travis Kalanick and take a look at the things in his background and the founding of Uber. Travis turned 40 this year. He was born in 1976 in Los Angeles, California. He grew up in the Valley, as they call it, in a place called Northridge. Northridge was famous for, in 1994, there was a massive earthquake that made world headlines, and that's the area where he grew up. After getting out of high school in the Valley, he got into UCLA in a computer engineering degree path. That was his major. That's what he was studying. So as you can see, this is a very bright guy that got into a great college, and he was studying pure geek. A lot of good geek that goes into that. And some of the greatest companies in the world are made out of comp sci majors and engineers who are just take that geekdom into stardom and build fantastic companies. Travis was no different. But apparently he had a little bit of an itch to do more than just go to college, because at the age of 22, in 1998, he dropped out of UCLA. Something that I happen to think is actually good. You need to get a degree to learn things like comp sci, but there's a side of me that doesn't believe that everyone should go to college. But anyway, that's for another story and another day. But in this case, he drops out and he joins a company called Scour. And Scour was a peer-to-peer search engine that included video, not just audio. Now, for those of you that remember, there's a little company called Napster that was doing peer-to-peer audio and allowed people to share songs without paying for them, or one person paid over here and 1,000 people shared the song, and meanwhile the artist and the record company got upset. Yeah, that was peer-to-peer. And Travis was working at a company called Scour. Now, it had some interesting first investment, which put Travis in contact with some big players. One of those was Michael Ovitz, former president of Disney and the founder of mega agency CAA, Creative Arts Agency, and Ron Burkle of Yucaipa Companies, a massive private equity company. So here he is dropping out of UCLA, joining Scour, and getting an acquaintanceship with some very big players. Well, in October of 2000, if you go back and take a look at history, you'll see that the peer-to-peer companies were getting sued, and that's what happened. Scour was sued by the Motion Picture Association of America and the Recording Association of America and about 30 other plaintiffs for what was said to be approximately $250 billion. Okay, if you're sued for $250 billion, it's really not a problem. And let me tell you why. If someone sues you or me for $1 million, we're in trouble. They could take everything we have from us. But if they're suing us for $250 billion, they're in trouble. We don't have that. You can sue me for that. You can sue me for Earth, the value of Earth. I haven't got it, so good luck with that. And what really happened is it forced the company into bankruptcy. So they filed Chapter 11 bankruptcy after being sued for amount which is bigger than the gross domestic product of Nicaragua. They said, okay, that's it. But undaunted, Travis creates Red Swoosh. It was also a peer-to-peer file sharing company, so he was staying in this peer-to-peer space. And we should stay tuned because Napster was also peer-to-peer, and there were some guys at Napster. The peer-to-peer community was a small world. So we're going to see a relationship here show up later, which is really important. Even in the midst of failure, sometimes relationships you have here become in handy here. So don't make enemies, move on, because you never know who can come back and help you later. So anyway, this runs for about 5-6 years, and he sells it to Akamai. Well, he's 30 years old now, and he sells a company to Akamai. So he experienced dropping out of school, joining a company that gets sued and goes bankrupt, and starting a company that doesn't go crazy. It only sells for something around $20 million. And funny thing is, he said that it was kind of a revenge business. Kalanick did an interview with Fast Company where he said, basically, everybody that was suing him over here became customers of Red Swoosh. So he thought it was kind of ironic, and he referred to it as the great revenge business. But anyway, he sells it, so he's had a successful sale, and he's at a conference. And he's at a web technology conference, and he hears some things that lead him to think about, maybe ordering a black car, town car to take you to the airport or out to dinner or something, maybe that could be made easier by using a cell phone app. And so the concept is born that would become Uber. And so Uber's founded in March 2009 as a company called Uber Cab. It was a black car service, and Travis was one of the co-founders, and back in those days, he called himself a mega advisor and the chief incubator. He wasn't the CEO as of yet. In 2010, in early 2010, a guy named Ryan Graves joins, a real product guru, and he becomes the first CEO. So they're working on this, putting it together, and in June of 2010, Uber launches in San Francisco. And at the time, an Uber black car costs like 1.5 times the cost as a cab. But guess what? You could get it really quick, and you could get it from your phone, and you could see how long it would take. So if we think back to Blue Ocean strategy and those 4 points that you remember about that, some very interesting things happen. What did they do with Uber? They added ease of use with technology. They reduced the hassle of waiting and hailing a cab on the street. Is that guy available? Is that guy available? Is that guy available? We've all been there. They also increased the availability of rides because you could see cabs that weren't necessarily on the street. You could see cars now with the Uber app that maybe were 5 streets away. You could signal them to come to you. So they increased the availability of rides, and then they eliminated the number one thing that we hate about cabs is the stinky car that is just atrocious. You don't ride in cabs because you want to. We've always ridden in cabs because we had to, and we ignore the thoughts of whatever has happened in the back seat, been thrown up in the back seat or left in the back seat. The whole smelly cab experience we set aside. And guess what? All of those 4 factors is pure blue ocean. So here comes Uber, a blue ocean, in getting rides for you and me to go where we need to go. So there you have 2010. Well, in October of 2010, they raised $1.25 million in seed funding. They got it from First Round Capital. A guy named Chris Sacca, who is a friend of Travis's, who was a lawyer who had worked at Google. He'd also been a guest on the Shark Tank show on TV. So he had been around with some early stage, wild ideas, of course. And another investor, Napster co-founder Sean Fanning, back from the peer-to-peer days back here, becomes an early seed investor in Uber. What goes around comes around, and sometimes people that you worked with over here come in handy over here. So there it is, December of 2010, after this wonderful, successful launch in San Francisco. And Ryan Graves, who was a CEO, he decided he'd be the GM, and Travis becomes the CEO. And so there you have it. In 2010, he becomes the CEO. So take a look at what he's learned in these 12 years from dropping out of UCLA to becoming CEO of Uber. If you didn't know this history, you would think, wow, he just got lucky, he had an idea to start a company. There is no luck here. This was a 12-year education. He got a master's degree in experience, failure, success, founding a company and all of the headaches that go along with it. That's what led to the creation of Travis Kalanick, who's now the CEO of Uber as 2010 comes to a close. Well, things are off and running, and once you have your seed funding and you're successful and you got a good team in place and a capable CEO, guess what? It's time for your Series A financing, your first real financing. And they raised $11 million in a round that was led by Benchmark, and it was a $60 million value and $11 million into the company invested. And Bill Gurley, the legendary VC Bill Gurley at Benchmark, joins the board of directors. Bill Gurley was a guy that invested in a company that I had a privilege to be a part of, Jamdat Mobile. He was in our Series D, but he was a guy who I have a lot of respect for and has been always on the forefront of some real innovative ideas. And nonetheless, there he is, Series A, $60 million valuation. Well, in May of 2011, just a couple months later, they actually launched in New York City. That was a little controversial because New York City is a union cab town, but nonetheless, they launched. Today, it's one of their biggest markets. And what's interesting, 5 years later, after launching, over a one-year period, from April 2015 to April 2016, Uber averaged 170,000 trips a day in New York. So 5 years later and all that controversy later, New York is one of their most controversial, but one of their most successful markets. Now, there's also an interesting thing that went on in 2011. There was a conference in the fourth quarter of 2011 called FailCon, F-A-I-L-C-O-N, FailCon, like the conference talking about failure. And you know who spoke? Travis Kalanick. And you know what he said? He said, the 10 years before Uber was a case study in failure, and he openly talked about all the things that led him to do this and do that, and the experience that made him who he is that day. So you should go Google that video and take a look at Travis's comments at FailCon 2011. You'll learn a lot from it. In December 2011, Uber decides it's time to go international. So they start with Paris, France, and they raise a $32 million Series B. So now in the course of just a few months, they've raised, $43 million. And the people in Series B, check this out. Menlo Ventures, a leading VC, not as good or as big as Benchmark, but certainly a high quality VC. Amazon's Jeff Bezos was involved, and Goldman Sachs. And if you don't think the Goldman Sachs boys make an investment here thinking about a future IPO, you're not paying attention. That's exactly how some banks get involved early. So, 5 years later, here in 2016, we look back and there were riots in France and protests because Uber had been very successful, and now they were trying to force, basically the entitled cab drivers were trying to force legislation and stuff to push Uber out of the way. But there would be no Uber if people didn't like it and didn't want to pay for it. And so they're trying to legislate away free enterprise. And it's just not going to work. But anyway, so that's what was happening this year, but the seeds of which were 2011 as they raised $32 million and had launched their first international market, Paris, France. They continue to grow and move, and in July of 2012, they announced Uber X. And it wasn't just black cars anymore. Now you could get a Prius. And it costs a little less than the black car. So they were just applying their technology and their expertise, building another product chapter, putting their mind to good use. And so you can see they didn't just say, it's all about black cars, all about black cars, all about limos. Nope, they were thinking beyond. And as we will see in a few minutes, they were thinking well beyond. So that service about, again, 35% less expensive than a black car. You had Priuses picking you up, and there you have it. Well, in August of 2013, now we're less than 2 years later, they continuing to grow and add cities, and controversy would come up from unionized cabbies. But here comes the big money. They raised $258 million from Google Ventures. And by the way, it was a $3.76 billion valuation. They were now what people like to call as a unicorn, which is a company that's a startup and suddenly worth more than $1 billion. And that was just incredible. So their forays and their success, drove a need for capital, but with that came the valuation. This is part of my point about going big and going fast. Within a year of that, July of 14, so July of 13, July of 14, they raised $1.4 billion in a Series D at a $17 billion valuation. Let me say that again, $17 billion valuation. And at one point, Uber was the most valuable private company, in other words, that hadn't gone public yet, startup that hadn't gone public. And they continued to invest in technology and apply that technology. For instance, they started Uber Pool, which you and I may know about. It's a carpool. You could see people going your direction. You could hop in an Uber with them. You only pay for your part of the trip, but you're all splitting it. So it's efficient for 2 or 3 people to share one Uber. Then they started Uber Rush, which was a bicycle messaging service in New York. Also started Uber Cargo, where you're allowing people to pick things up and drop it off in trucks and small vans. And then Uber Eats. And as a matter of fact, the founder of Valuetainment, Patrick Bet-David, he used Uber Eats a lot because we're working crazy hours and we want good meals delivered. And so we're customers of Uber Eats. We say, hey, we need to get something. Get me one of these, one of those. We call for Uber Eats and then great food is here. And that is an example of strategy thinking beyond and strategy applying, saying, we got this technology with mapping. We know how to map things. We know how to make efficient routes. We know how to do all these things. Why not deliver food? Why not pick up cargo? Why shouldn't bicycle messengers use this as well? And that is the first chapter of Uber, going all the way to their Series D, the first 6 years with the growth. And as you know, if you read the headlines, and I know you pay attention, because these viewers, I know you ask me questions and things that show me that you're really diving in. I'm going to do a second case study that talks about 2014 to 2016 and all the things that Uber faced, such as facing competition from Lyft, much smaller, but also a competitor, facing the city of Austin, Texas, putting in legislation that actually led to Uber and Lyft saying, okay, the hell with it. We'll leave Austin, Texas. See what the people have to say about that. Maybe they go back to City Hall and say, hey, we need more than just taxis. Come back. Well, we're going to see how that's going to play out. We're also going to see some things happen internationally, such as having to leave Hungary because Hungary forced federal legislation down their throat and basically defended legacy inefficient cab service. Socialist entitlement, squashing free enterprise at its worst happened in Hungary. And so we're going to see how Uber maintains its status of an incredible growing company and raises billions and billions of more dollars in capital to continue global expansion and becomes a fantastic mature company responding to things that are going on around it under the leadership of a UCLA dropout named Travis Kalanick. And that, my friends, is chapter 1 of Uber, the making of Travis Kalanick and Uber, reminding you of those simple points. Great CEOs quite often don't come out of nowhere. They have a lot of experience. And if you're out there getting that experience, you could be the founder of something really special when you get there. And my other 2 points. 1, put a great core team around you early, but stay lean. And then when you know you got something and it's time to go big and go fast. And as you can see, Uber went out to get the capital to do exactly that. I'm looking forward to another time where we dive into the other side of Uber, and I gave you a little sneak peek of that. And for today, we are saying thank you, and I'll see you next time. And please subscribe to Valuetainment, the best channel on the internet for content for entrepreneurs. Until next time, I'm Tom Ellsworth, and I hope I left you better than I found you.